Hi there, my fellow Java programmer. In this episode, you're going to learn what OAuth2 is, why you will want to use it, and how it works. So let's get started. So I could give you a very dry, boring presentation of what OAuth2 is, but instead I'm going to show you a very practical example of it. On my website, you can sign up for subscriptions, and at the end you can pay with credit card or PayPal. And credit card is using Stripe as a payment provider, PayPal is just PayPal. You enter your details, you send it off, and you make the payment. And at the end, for tax reasons, I have to create a PDF invoice for my tax consultants. And I'm not doing that myself, I'm using a third-party web service, which is called Quaderno, which connects to my PayPal account or to my Stripe account, has a look at were there any new and recent payments, and if so, it creates an invoice for that payment. And when you open up the Quaderno console, you can see I'm connected with Stripe, I'm connected with PayPal, and there's also different other connections or integrations I could do. Now, how does that work? How is Quaderno able to connect to my PayPal account? And let's think about a couple of naive approaches to that problem. So first of all, it could be that I simply give Quaderno my username and password, my PayPal username and password, and it connects to that account and just gets the recent payment information. The problem is, you don't want to do that. You don't want to give any third-party web service your full credentials, and then they could in turn just log into your account, make some purchases, change account configuration, whatnot. It's a really bad way just to share your credentials, your actual credentials, with any web service or web application out there. So then there could be other ways. It could be that Quaderno does a direct integration with PayPal, and they have some sort of development key or whatnot, or integration key, and then they simply can connect to PayPal with any account and tell them, well, PayPal, please give me the recent payment information for Marco or for some other guy. Also very unlikely to happen that two organizations just share some global integration key and then trust each other, especially with payment information. And then there's a couple of other ways, but the main question is, can't we do better? And yes, we can, and that's where OAuth comes in, or OAuth2. Imagine you would now want to integrate with a third payment provider, Braintree, Recurly, or GoCardless. So I just hit GoCardless, and in the URL already you can see, well, that's an OAuth URL, but what does that even mean? So OAuth is a delegating access protocol. And here's some OAuth vocabulary. First of all, you've got the protected resource, and the protected resource in that scenario is my GoCardless account. I don't have a GoCardless account, but imagine it's your GoCardless account, it's your PayPal account, it's your Stripe account, whatnot. That is the protected resource that someone wants to have access to. Then you have the resource owner. The resource owner is myself, so me, the person. And then you have an OAuth client, and the client in that case is Quaderno. Quaderno wants to connect to the protected resource, GoCardless, on my behalf. And it wants me to basically authorize myself once, so I delegate part of my authority to access GoCardless to Quaderno. And that's pretty much it. And now the question is, there's one piece missing, and it's actually the authorization server. That's the piece of software which makes the delegation possible. So as you saw, when I click integrate with GoCardless, I get redirected to a URL. Right, and on that URL, I have to enter my GoCardless account details, so email and password. Now when I do that and submit the form, what happens in the background is that information is being sent to the authorization server. The authorization server checks if it's a valid username and password, and if that's the case, it sends back an access token. And then the access token gets sent to Quaderno, and Quaderno can store the access token, and the next time it wants to access my GoCardless account, it simply sends the access token. That's great, because at no point in time in this process are the credentials or are your credentials exposed to the client, so to Quaderno or to anyone else. And what's even better, when you go back, you can see that there's also some sort of a rights management and an OAuth terms that's called scopes. So not only do you say, well, that's my username and password, but also to the authorization server, You're telling, well, Quaderno will be able to view, create, and make changes to customers' payment subscriptions and other information, but it cannot make changes to, say, the account details themselves or change my address or whatever. So you basically restrict what the client can do to a couple of rights or to a couple of scopes. And that is also quite nice and nifty. So that is a basic high-level and sometimes idealized view of how OAuth2 works, but you now know all the components involved. And it's basically a resource owner, so yourself, it's a client application, in that case Quaderno, it's an authorization server, which you don't see here, and it's a protected resource, which is your Go Cardless account in that example. And that's all you need to know to continue. Congratulations, you now know how OAuth2 works in principle. And in the next episode, you're going to learn how to build a simple OAuth client, which is able to connect to PayPal to get some payment information and do stuff like creating some invoices and whatnot. So let's get right after it.